Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Well, I think we've got a good program lined up for you today. It is a nice, brisk, cool morning here on the shop, and I walked down from the house and, yeah, couldn't believe, boy, you could tell fall's in the air this morning. Got a lot of stuff here to cover today. I hope we can cover it in the time we have allotted. Thought I'd wear my Superman shirt today. Just feeling real strong about stuff. I've been noticing that the shop talks, the ends, the last several have been cut off. I don't know. I guess it's because there must be some delay in the Starlink link getting the stuff up there. And yeah, so I guess I'll try to leave it live here another 5 minutes longer or something before I cut it off. I don't know what that'll do, but I do know it's the last several shop talks, the ends have been cut off significantly. I know some of you had made comments that you thought maybe I did that, but I didn't. It's just the way it is. First order of business is to remind everyone of the auction that's going on live on my website. If you're not familiar with it, please check it out. Go to rosastringworks.com and click on the auctions tab. There are 8 instruments being auctioned off. It's an older fella. He's selling off all of his instruments. He can no longer play them. So you'd be helping him out significantly if you were to bid on his instruments. There are 4 that I think are real steals. I mean, all of them are worth the money, but there's 4 of them that are, I think, definitely worth the money. And one of them is selling way below retail right now. That would be the Gibson A Mandolin. That one could probably sell at least $500 more and you wouldn't get hurt at all, and perhaps more than that. The other instrument that I like is his guitar here, and I'm going to play that for you a little later in the program. And he also has another cheaper mandolin that's pretty good, but the 2 other main instruments that are really good are the one banjo, which is a Hofner banjo. Other than the cheap tuners, that's a pretty darn good banjo. And then the other thing that is pretty good is the old fiddle. It's pretty good as well. So anyway, check those things out and see what you think. Now, there's a cheap banjo on there also, which, it's not much. It's worth about where it's at right now, I would imagine, or maybe a little more. The 2 dulcimers, I'm sure they're worth a little more than where they're at right now, but I'm not big on dulcimers, but both of those dulcimers are nice dulcimers. So if you're into dulcimers, you could get a good buy on a dulcimer also. Okay, moving right along. You've been seeing me in my daily vlogs complain about the Martin, and it's right here. And I did get the bridge plate out successfully yesterday. It didn't come out easy, just that last little piece. It still took quite a while to get it out of there, but I got it out. And I already have the new bridge plate in there, and I'm very happy with the way that turned out. So I've got the bridge plate in. It's been drying for 24 hours now. So today's job, if I get to it today, will be to take the bridge off. Not sure I'll get there today. Now you keep in mind that after I get that done and get a new bridge on here, we still have to reset the neck. So you'll see all that in a video down the road, but that little sucker has been eating my lunch, especially on taking that bridge plate out. I haven't mentioned the world's finest mandolin ever built by a human in a while, and I'm telling you what, I love that mandolin. I really love it. I am really glad I didn't sell it. I mean, yeah, that kind of money would have been awesome to sell it and make that money, but wow, I love that mandolin. I'm seriously telling you. I don't dislike any of my mandolins. I've got some other really fine mandolins that almost anybody would, love to have. But that one there, I love it for several reasons. Number one, it's just got an awesome sound. And number two, it's just really got the looks that goes with it. It's really cool. So anyway, I'm real happy with it, just in case you were wondering. I mentioned earlier this week that I might possibly sell off my deer antler part of the business. And I'm, kicking that around with Caleb partly, and then several other people mentioned they'd be interested as well. I have their names on file. It might be that down the road I'll go ahead and pull the trigger on that. I really don't know right now. I'm trying not to rush into it. I'm trying to think it through real well. So anyway, I'm kind of dragging my feet on that in case you're wondering, but it may happen down the road. I've got a video clip here. Spencer has been to the shop many times. He's one of my good customers. He's from up around Fayette, Missouri, I believe. And here's a little clip showing a few instruments that he brought this time. He brought several more, but these are just a few that I have here on video. Spencer is at it again. He's brought me a whole slew of instruments, and I think we've shown this before, but it's such a cool mandolin and it's got such a good sound. It's a 1950 Gibson F12 that's been reworked, as it were. It has been refinished, and but it's up in really good shape. It's got a really neat sound. I like the sound of it. Yep, it's really got the sound, that's for sure. It's a really nice old mandolin. Then we've got a old Gibson guitar here too. Boy, this thing's a real gem. Tell me about this one, Spencer.
L3.
It's an L3.
21.
What year?
21.
It's a 1921 L3, and it's up in very good shape. We would call this mostly original. Pretty much everything down here for sure is original. I'm debating on the tuning keys. I can tell they have been changed out, but I don't know if those are original. Maybe those are original back to it. I don't know. But there's the peg head. But boy, it's a nice guitar. They have their own sound. And the tailpiece is in really good shape. I forget what you call that tailpiece. Do you know what it's called? A celluloid? Yeah, it's a celluloid type tailpiece. And then there's, of course, the original arch top bridge there. Looks like it might be missing the pick guard. I imagine it had a pick guard at one time, because it's got the hole in here where the little needle went through for it to hold that into the pick guard. Pretty cool guitar though. Here's the really cool guitar. It's a Washburn from the 1880s. I don't know models on these kinds of things here. It just says new model on the inside. It's a neat little guitar, and I think Spencer owes me on this one, because apparently Spencer was seen on my channel once before, and the son of a friend that knew Spencer called him up and ended up hooking him up with this guitar. So it's pretty cool. It's got a lot of cracks, and the bridge is coming off of it, so I can't play it for you. But I guess I'll give Spencer some sort of an estimate on fixing this up. It is a really nice old Washburn guitar. It really puts me to mind of an early Martin. I mean, it's very much like an old Martin. Just looking at it, that's what I thought it was when I first saw it. And when I saw the little emblem inside, I thought, well, that's a Martin emblem. I didn't look at it close enough, and sure enough, it's Washburn. The back looks like it's a rosewood to me, and the top looks like some sort of a spruce, but I couldn't tell you which spruce that is for sure. Very nice. Spencer's always digging them out of the rat holes somewhere. I don't know where he comes up with all those old instruments, but he's always got a bunch of them. And yeah, that old Gibson guitar is pretty sweet, really loud. But I believe that had been refinished also. But, you know, for the most part, it was pretty original. You know, I mentioned another one of my sagas is working on that old 3500 Dodge Ram 1-ton pickup truck. And, you know, I mentioned to you that they had designed into it different things that wouldn't allow the average person to work on it. I mentioned how I had to reach down in this little tiny hole to get to the radiator drain plug to drain the fluid out. And you had to do it with an Allen wrench, and you can't see what you're doing, and you can't see it at all from any angle. You know, it just, you can't see it. And so it wasn't meant to be done by a mere human, so Superman had to do it. And so here's what Superman is doing to make it easier in the future. Well, I told you in my vlog how aggravating this was because they put these little tabs on top of here so you can't slide a wrench on this to reach in there with a socket wrench. Oh, it's all intentional whether you believe it or not. If you don't believe it, you are absolutely naive, my friend. So this boy ain't having it. I'm getting rid of those notches. And I'm just going to take a file here and get rid of them. And that way I can put a socket on here. Especially when I go to reinstall it, I'll be able to reach in there and use a ratchet action instead of having to take the tool out of the end here and reinsert it when you can't even see what you're doing. Okay, there, you can see how flat that is now, and then here's the opposite side. So that way I can slide a socket on here. And just a quick follow-up is after I filed off the other side, the socket fit on there perfectly. I think it was a 16 millimeter. And I went out there and reached down in that dark, deep hole and put it right on with the socket wrench. It went on in like that fast. It took me 20 minutes to get that out of there and took me less than a minute to put it back on. I mean, it just silliness like that, you know. And a lot of you had some real, you know, supporting comments on that when I mentioned that in the vlog, and then others had other ideas about it and things of ways to do it. One of them would be to get the hex sockets. You can get sockets that are like Allen wrenches on the end. Well, I don't have any of those. I mean, it's something I can put in my arsenal down the road, so maybe I'll get some of those for down the road, but at least I cured the problem on that one. And like I said, I installed that in less than 30 seconds. My buddy Ron happened to be there when I installed it, and he goes, "You got it in already?" And I went, "Yeah, it was like nothing to put it back in once you had the right tool and you got rid of their mess to keep you from using the proper tool." Anyway, just some of those frustrations that you run into when you try to do your own work these days. I'm sure you all familiar, and I'm sure all the mechanics out there know it all too well. I have a whole bunch of topics here to cover that people mentioned in yesterday's vlog. Now, I got these off at a certain point yesterday, so there could be some more added since I got these off, and if there were, I'm sorry I didn't get to those. But here's the ones I have right now. I'll just read them off, and then we'll talk about them. One person wanted to know about the binding that sinks down, you know, sunken binding, so that it's not level with the surface and what to do about that. The 12th fret versus the 14th fret guitars, what's the difference? What's the difference in sound, etc. Talk about that. Broken neck repairs, thoughts, tips, and tricks, like on that broken neck mandolin repair, maybe to give a little bit more information on how I think about going about something like that, or how I decide to tackle something like that. Dovetail neck joints, where to start, how to progress on those. Maybe a revisit of my mandolin strap on how to retie that. And let's see, finger plane blade installation, where to start on building a guitar or an instrument, guitar sound hole sizes, neck bending the wrong way, which I think they mean overbow in the neck, this way it sounded. And then just repairing people's fixes that other people have done. Well, I said I would take a deep dive into these items. Well, the problem is that my pool isn't real deep on some of these, so I can't dive real deep. But I will tell you what I know about them and what I would do about them and things like that. And I'll try to keep it relatively short on each of these. I'm not going to deep dive into most of them. A couple I'll go a little deeper, but like on sunken binding, for instance, you don't have many options on something like that. When the binding has sunk below the surface of the guitar, what are you going to do? I mean, common sense will tell you your options are fairly limited. One option, of course, is to just get rid of the binding and put new binding in. And that's possibly a good option. But then again, if it's an old vintage instrument, maybe the best option is to do nothing at all. So, you need to weigh it out. If it's an old vintage instrument and it's worth some money, I would recommend just leave it alone. Don't mess with it and live with it, learn how to live with it. But if it's just an instrument that, maybe doesn't have that kind of value, but you want to make it look better because you like it or whatever the reason might be, well, then there's a couple options. I mean, under certain circumstances, I could see how you could actually lay some more binding right over the top of it. I could actually see that under certain circumstances. That wouldn't be the norm, wouldn't be the normal way to fix it. Probably the way you'd have to go about fixing it is to actually remove the binding and then just put in new binding that would actually fit it better. That's probably the way you'd have to fix it. I know that doesn't sound like fun, and it's not fun. There's most of the things you have to do on instruments like that, they're hard to do. There's no simple, easy, just do this and it'll be magically fixed. Most of the time, that's not the answer. And so, unfortunately, I have to tell you that to fix sunken binding, you got your work cut out for you. If it's a cheap instrument and all you want to do is level it out, you might be better off just scraping what's there nice and flat and level, and then just taking another thin veneer of binding and gluing right to it, and then just scrape it all back down. I mean, I could see that happening on a cheap instrument. I don't think I would do that on, a real fine old vintage instrument. So I'm going to pass on that one for now, and that's about as deep as I'm going. Here's one that is real shallow for me, and you may think, well, man, you would think you would know more about this. Well, I don't, unfortunately, and that's the 12th fret versus the 14th fret. Let me just explain where I'm coming from. I got hands this big. They're huge hands. I always like the bigger instruments. Now, especially on the mandolin. I'm a mandolin player. I'm not really a guitar player, so to speak. I mean, I can play a guitar. I can play almost any song on a guitar. I'm not saying I can't do that, but I'm not a guitar player. In other words, I don't get out and really, jam on a guitar and really play lead and that kind of thing. So I'm not a guitar, quote unquote, enthusiast, if you will. Therefore, when it comes to the 12th versus the 14th fret, I don't have a huge opinion on that because I don't play guitar that much. So that's where I'm coming from. And if I know something about a subject, I'll be the first one to tell you what I know. But when I don't know, I'm not going to try to blow a bunch of smoke at you and try to make it sound like I know something. So the bottom line is on the 12th versus 14th fret instrument, I would probably have to pass on that and let someone else answer that question. I can tell you on a mandolin, they have the same issue. You have your long neck mandolin and your short neck mandolin. And it's very simple decision for me. With hands this big, I want the long neck mandolin. It's just that simple. I feel like I'm just crunched together when I try to play those short neck mandolins. I feel like I'm trying to play a toy. Now, I don't mean to offend anybody. I know a lot of people love those short neck mandolins and they're vintage instruments, and I'm auctioning one off on my website right now. But for me, it's just a no-go thing. So for me, it's more the length and the size than it is anything else. And but on the 12th versus 14th fret guitar, I know that's a debate that could go on all day long, and I don't really have a dog in that fight, so I'm just going to leave that one alone, unfortunately. Broken neck repair, thoughts, tips, and tricks. Well, I got my videos out on that. There's 2 parts out on that. Was it J. Ford mandolin, owned by Dutch Miller out in Oklahoma. So the first 2 parts are out on that mandolin on repairing that neck. Part 3 will have to wait till Emery gets back. But my thoughts on when you got to tackle a big job like that, I guess the first thought is to really look it over good. I mean, seriously, don't just jump in and start doing something. It really pays to think about a big job. It doesn't matter whether it's a broken neck or whether it's, a crack in the side or what it is. Look at it, think it over, and like, for instance, a number of people on that broken neck said I should have, there was 2 trains of thoughts. One of them was I should have replaced the whole neck. The other train of thought was I should have routed it out and inlaid it and not cut it in 2. Well, in my opinion, and everybody has an opinion, in my opinion, both of those are completely 100% the wrong way to go. And I mean like 100%. Like replacing the whole neck, that is just mass destruction on a mass destruction level. There is no reason to do that. Replacing the whole neck is one of the hardest things you'll do on any instrument. It's not easy. That's not the quick way to go. That's not the easy way to go, and that's not the way you're going to fix it the best. Because if you've ever tried to take a neck out of a neck joint, especially a mandolin, you're in for a treat right there, I can tell you, because there's no easy way to get it out. You talk about breaking something, you're breaking something in a big way when you start taking a neck out of a mandolin. So, the reason I didn't choose the option to route out the area there and inlay a piece was because, first of all, that had already been done, number one, and it didn't hold. And I think they had done it twice, and it didn't hold. So, you had the original, you had 2 repairs, and now I'm the 3rd repair on it. So what I did was I studied it for a long time, and I could see cracks going in various and sundry places. And those cracks, first of all, it's hard to get glue down in them. They're your weak spot. Even after you inlay things, if those cracks still radiate out, you've got problems. So what I did was I said, I'm going to cut my losses. I'm going to cut this thing off right here in the middle. I'm going to plane off everything that's been broken. Everything that's been repaired, everything that's been broken, I'm getting rid of it. I'm going down to fresh, clean wood. And when you saw me saw it off, then you saw all those splinters come out. That just enforced my case that those splinters had gone all the way up into the peg head. But by the fact that they came out, I could get glue on them really well, force them right back into place. You can't even hardly tell that they came out because they came out perfectly. I put them back in perfectly. And so that fixed all of that issue. Then I cut the long tapers on there. So to me, in other words, to dive into something like that, you really do want to consider everything. You want to think, well, what if I did it this way? What if I did it that way? And you want to consider a bunch of options. Don't lock in on one option. I mean, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that either. You don't know when you start on a job how you're going to do it. Now, cutting it in half, you got to have some faith in your ability. I was pretty positive I could do that. So I wasn't too worried about it. Some people, I will also say, made a comment that the reason that, the neck did, I tried to cut that joint and get it real flat. Well, it kind of tapered a little bit, and they said that's because I tilted it. It's got nothing to do with the tilt. It's got to do with the blade wasn't perfectly square to my block. I thought it was, but it wasn't. And when I say perfect, I mean perfect. If it's not perfect, you're going to pay for it twice. It's going to be half of it's down here and twice of it's up there. If that makes any sense to you. So whatever you're off by your angle, it's going to be exaggerated because it's cutting more away on the bottom and is leaving more on the top. So it's going to be twice as thick up here as it is down there. Anyway, it's hard to explain that, but it had nothing to do with the angle this way. When you push it through there, the block is square, and you're going to cut the same amount off the neck one way as you will the other. It's just that the block wasn't perfectly square to the blade. I should have checked it better, and I didn't. But that didn't really cause a problem anyway, because I was able to just sand through that. It wasn't a big deal. But for your average person that has never done that before, that could have been a catastrophe. But, when I saw that happen, I went, dadgummit, I wish that wouldn't have happened, but then it wasn't a big deal to fix it anyway. So, anyway, that's, I guess, my best explanation of it is that you don't want to lock in on the first thing you think about. It's kind of like these detectives investigating a murder case. Once you lock in on something, that's your focus. You can't see anything else, and you shouldn't lock in. You should try to consider all the facts. And that's what I did on this. I really feel like I did stop and consider all the facts. And I considered the fact that it had been repaired twice before. And then that was a huge factor. I'm thinking, well, if two different people, but you'll see in part 3, the main reason that I think I was successful and the rest of them weren't. You'll see in part 3. I'm not going to give it away, but there's more coming, and it's probably the most important factor. Even though I may not actually point it out that strongly in the video, but you'll see that I left some additional detail or something, I guess I'd say. I don't want to give it away. But anyway, you'll see in part 3 that what I did was, as good as it's going to get, I guess I would say. Okay, so the dovetail joint on a guitar, where to start, how to progress on that. Well, for me, I can do it either way. I can cut the dovetail in the block first, or I can cut the dovetail on the neck first. And typically, I cut the neck first. I find that probably easier. Mainly because I do it all by hand, as you've seen. I don't use jigs and fixtures and, holding things. And I could do that. I've even got a couple things that I could, but I just don't. I just do it by hand. I've had no problem doing it by hand. I'm not necessarily recommending anybody else do it that way. But I've just had enough experience with those kinds of tools that I think I can pull that off. So I cut the dovetail in the end of the neck first. And the reason is because that one's the most fidgety. You can screw that one up, especially because I do it freehand. I could mess that one up a little bit, if you will. I don't feel like I ever really mess them up, but that one's the one that's going to be the most fidgety. So anyway, I cut the dovetail in the neck first. Now, the important thing is that you use the same dovetail bit on your router on both pieces. If you switch somehow in there, you're never going to get it to work. So you got to use the same dovetail bit on both pieces, and you kind of have to sneak up on it, if you will, if you really want to make a good fit and as close a fit as you can before you start to the by hand fitting. I always always, and I mean like I can't even say it strong enough, always want to make the joint over tight when I first make it. In other words, I'll cut the dovetail on the neck to whatever size it comes out to. But when I measure it on the guitar, I'm going to make sure that it measures that the slot is much smaller than the neck dovetail. So the dovetail in the body or in the block is going to be a lot tighter, a lot closer together, if you will. I don't even know how to say that in English, but the point is you want to be able to keep trimming on the block to make it fit right. Because see, you got so many angles to think of there. You got your neck angle, like if the body's flat, well, right here. If you got the body right here, you know, you've got the neck angle this way, up and down. You got the neck angle this way, sideways. And you've also got the twist angle this way. It's like an airplane. You got those kinds of airplanes have to deal with those same things, you know, those same different planes. So you got twist to think about too. So you want to sneak up on it, you know. Now, if you happen to have, you know, some high-end jig that just cuts them perfectly on the first go, well then great, go for it. I don't have a problem with that. Using technology, that's what we're all about as humans. I do not have a problem with that. I just want you to understand. I just don't happen to have access to any of that, so I do it by hand. And because I do it by hand, I have to be extra cautious. And that's why I go ahead and cut the dovetail on the neck first, and then the way I measure that, let me explain how I measure that. If I should have maybe made some examples of that, and I don't really have anything that has a dovetail on it that I can show you. But what you do is you measure the inside narrow part of the dovetail. That's what I measure. And then I mark that off on the block. And then I stay within those lines. And as long as you do that, then your neck block is going to go in there tight, if that makes sense to you. So in other words, on the neck dovetail, I measure the inside edges right up next to the heel. I measure how wide it is down at the bottom, how wide it is at the top, and it's the narrowest part of the dovetail. I mark that out on the top of the block on the guitar, and then when I route that out, I stay even within those lines. And as long as you do that, it's going to be a tight fit, as long as you're using the same bit and all that. I hope that makes sense to you. It's important that you cut them at the same depth also, because like in other words, if you cut the dovetail joint on the neck at, say, I don't know, 5/8 of an inch deep or something. I'm just making that up because I don't really know off the top of my head. But let's say you cut it at 5/8, and then you cut the one in the block at a different depth. Well, it's not going to fit real good. You want to try to keep them about the same depth also. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on it. But the thing is, you sneak up on it. You don't try to cut it all at once unless you have the high dollar jig that will let you do that. And if you do, go for it. I got no problem with that. All right, well, I think I beat that to death. Mandolin strap, I didn't prepare that one. I forgot about that one, and I didn't prepare a string for that. But, I think I had that in a vlog out there or a shop talk out there. I can't remember which one, and so I should try to find that and refer it to you. If I can find that, I'll put a link to the description of this video. It's not out there now, of course. I'll try to put it out there later. But really, for the mandolin strap, what I do is I just use paracord, and you can pick out any paracord you like, whether you want the black one or you want one with the pattern in it or whatever suits your taste. And the bottom line is it's as simple as just tying a hangman's noose in both ends. That's all I do. And the hangman's noose won't come loose. That's why they used it. and then you can slide it up tight on the tail pin, and it won't come off your tail pin. Once you slide it up tight, it's not going to back off and come off. That's the other advantage of using the hangman's noose. And then the other end on the mandolin, or I put it around, of course, my scroll. But if you don't have a scroll, you could put it on another pin up there. Or if you're one of those that puts it around the neck, you could put it around the neck. But you'd have to tie it around the neck unless you had your strings off, of course, and then you could slide it over there. But anyway, that's all I really do is I just make a hangman's noose on both ends. And I'll try to find that video and put a link to it. Finger plane blade installation. I'll use the bigger finger plane so that you can see it better. This is the largest finger plane I have. And first of all, there's a beveled side and then there's a flat side. And the question mostly came about which way does it go into the block here. And you put the bevel side down. The bevel is down. So that when you put it in here like this, and I'll stick it through further, and you can see that the bevel is down. Now, of course, you don't put it that deep, obviously. And then for setting the depth, I don't know. This is kind of a feel thing and kind of an experience thing. But anyway, I got to back that off. Okay, now for setting the depth, I just kind of feel under there, and when I can feel just a certain amount protrude, and that's really how I do it. I just do it by feel, and then I just tighten her down then. And then, again, that the bevel is down, and the reason is because these are at the angle where that bevel then kind of glides across the top, and just the very front edge of this is catching anything. And of course, to use it, you have to mostly put the pressure on the very front here, because that's what makes that front catch. Because you really stop and think about it, this is the only part here that's riding. Just this little narrow part here and here is what's riding on the wood. The back of it, for the most part, it's not really even touching what you're planing. I mean, that's not 100% true, but it's kind of true. So anyway, that's really all there is to that. You just put the blade in there with the bevel side down. Of course, I sharpen mine with a hollow grind on my grinder. I've shown how to do that in the past too, but basically I just take it and set it on the little shelf on the grinder there, and I just rock the blade kind of like this on the grinder and just kind of hold it real still. Even on those little tiny blades, I just rock it back and forth and try to keep it exactly perpendicular, or well, not perpendicular, but you know what I mean, the same angle. Try not to let it twist or anything, just kind of do that and rock it really steadily across the wheel, and that cuts one continuous grind all the way across there. And once you get that hollow grind, then it's real easy to go to a stone and you lay that hollow grind right on your stone and you work it around. And then of course, then you do have to kind of rock the blade to get, because I use round bottom finger planes, by the way. There are flat bottom ones, but these are all the round bottom. And so all my blades are rounded, as I sharpen them. So you do have to rock it there to sharpen it on the stone. The next point that someone asked was, where do you start when you're trying to build a guitar or an instrument? Well, you could ask 100 people and get 100 answers on that. But where I started when I did it was I got a good book, and I seriously read the book a lot. I've told you before, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, I read the book cover to cover 8 times. And I know that sounds crazy, but I was, number one, obsessed with the idea of building my first mandolin. So I wanted to understand it really, really well. I didn't want to be going, well, what does this mean or what does that mean? I wanted to understand it before I got into it. So I guess maybe that's where you start, is do plenty of research, do plenty of, reading and maybe asking questions and talking to people and stuff, and try to understand it really, really well is where I think I would tell you to start. And then in terms of what part to start on, for me, the way I like to approach any instrument that I'm building is I like to start on the hardest part first, whatever that is, the one that's going to take the most time. Because there's no point in working on the easy stuff and getting all that done, and then you get to the hard part and you go, I can't get this done. So work on the hardest thing first and get it over with. And then all you got to look forward to is the easy stuff from that point on. I hope that helps, but that's kind of my thought process and how I do it. The guitar sound hole sizes. As far as the sizes of the different sound holes, to some degree, bigger is better. I think most luthiers and most musicians that know anything about it would tell you bigger is better on your sound hole. But I would also tell you there's always a point of diminishing returns. At some point when you make it too big, it's going to not sound very good. That's kind of the case with everything. It doesn't really matter what it is that you're doing on an instrument. If you take it to an extreme, you're going to go, that's probably a little much. And it's the same way with a sound hole. So for my money, I would stick to a sound on a dreadnought-sized guitar. Now, of course, it depends on the size of your guitar also. I would do some research on the sound hole size for the size guitar you're building, and I would stick with the larger size of the recommended size, and maybe even an 1/8 inch bigger. But that would be about it. I wouldn't go a lot bigger. I think you're asking for trouble if you go a whole lot bigger. Tony Rice was well known for increasing the sound hole size of his guitar. So, that there's something to it. It does sound really good when the guitar has a little bit more, but I stick around 4 inches is where I stay on my guitars. I try not to go much bigger than that. That'll give you some idea. When a neck is bending the wrong way on a guitar, in other words, it's got an overbow, somebody on the comments said, well, are you sure the truss rod's not too tight? And the reply back was that there was no truss rod in this particular instrument. Okay, well, if it's got an overbow, it's kind of like when you're fixing that broken neck. You got to study and look at all the aspects of it and see where the problem's coming from and where the problem exists in the neck. Is it up there by the fretboard, or is it in the middle, or is it towards the back end? Where does the overbow happen? Or is it really a long overbow and it kind of extends the whole instrument? If it's confined to a short space, I would say very often you fix it in that short space. In other words, if you can file through the frets and fix it, file through the frets and fix it. But if you can't, in other words, let's say there's a knot in the fretboard for whatever reason, maybe it drew moisture in that area, I don't know. But whatever the reason, there's a knot there. If there's a hump in that area, well then maybe pull the frets out in that area and actually sand or file or plane or whatever it takes that area until you get it flat with the rest of it. And then put the frets back in and then, do your fret leveling, because you will have to level your frets. Anytime you pull frets out and put them back in, you really do need to re-level them. You might believe that you can drive them in perfectly, but you'll never do it. There'll always be with a couple of thousandths out. Even when you do it really, really well, there'll always be a couple thousandths out. And a couple thousandths sometimes is all it takes to make it buzz. So you do need to re-level them, whatever you do. If the problem is not confined to a specific space, if it's really the full length of that, then I hate to say it, but there's no easy fix to some of these things. And if the strings won't pull that out, well, then you're probably forced to take the fretboard off and level through the neck itself, by planing it, sanding it, whatever it takes, putting the fretboard back on. That's probably what you'll have to do. One of the most common places for an overbow is right at the attachment point to the body. If you just think about the common sense of it, it's going to tell you this is going to happen on almost every instrument, and it pretty much does. and that is that you've got an angle, and I'm exaggerating the angle, but your neck angle is down like this compared to the body. Well, when you get there, well, this is going to be in the air at that point, so you've got to bend it down to make it match to the top here, or you put one of those elevation things underneath it. Some people do that. But I prefer to bend them down. Well, when you do that, that causes a slight arch in the middle, right in this area. It makes, the wood just has to bow. And so there's often a high spot right here. So most of the time, though, that high spot, you can file through the frets and fix it. So I hope that addresses your question about the neck bending the wrong way. More than likely, you're going to have to fix it the hard way, and that is take the fretboard off and fix it. But if it's just confined to a specific area, fix the specific area. And that's what I do. Let's see. Repairing other people's fixes is the last point here. You know what? You would think I would have that stand out to me and I would be able to just go, well, yeah, this guy here, you wouldn't believe what I did here. But there's really only one that stands out. And I've told about this one at least 2 or 3 times before. And that's the one where the guy put the firecrackers in there, and then he put the whole big bottle of glue in there, and then he put baby bed railing and paneling off his wall up in there. And if anybody wants me to tell that whole story again, I will, but I've already told it at least 2 or 3 times on the channel, so I'm not going to go through that. But honestly, that's the only one that stands out. The rest of them were just stuff, I mean, like you see stuff all the time. And like, you see toothpicks up in there, you see popsicle sticks, you see rulers, you just see stuff glued up inside of instruments. And it's like, that's why I kept making a joke out of it. Do not glue random pieces of wood up inside your instrument. I mean, because it just happens quite often, honestly. And Martin, when I got a kick out of, that was the one thing I thought was really funny, was when that one guy did the Martin tour on YouTube, and he went through the Martin factory. They went to the Wall of Shame, I think it was, they called it, and it was all the stuff that they had taken out of instruments and put it on the wall. So that's probably my main problem with other people's fixes. Now, granted, they've done a lot of other things that's not been good too, but they don't stand out to me because I do so much of this. Trying to think of just a couple of those that were really bad, but most of them are just sloppy work, and that's the truth of it. It's just like they don't clean up their glue. They didn't get the parts lined properly when they glued them, and you'll see that on fiddles just constantly, where like there's a crack in the top, and now they glue it back, and they glue it back like this. So instead of gluing it back like that, they glue it back like that, and that happens all the time. You see that all the time. So really, I would love to tell you some more funny stories about that, but the truth is they all run together on me. I just don't have any. I'm going to do you a song on this auction guitar here, and then we're going to go to questions if we have time. We're running low on time already. I know I saw a bunch of questions scroll up the screen, and we will get to them. I just wanted to play this guitar. Now, I know that you can buy this guitar relatively inexpensively. But here's the 2 things I want to let you think about. Number 1, the strings on this are super old. I mean, like super old. I bet they're at least 10 years old, and if probably closer to 15 or 20. And it still sounds good. It is a plywood guitar, and I just want to make that clear. I don't want anybody thinking I'm trying to pass off something, but it just happens to have a really good sound, I think. And, not every time, when you buy one of these, and maybe you can buy it brand new for, I don't know, I'm just making this up because I don't know, but $150 somewhere in there. Well, if you don't always get a good sounding one. This one sounds good. So that's the difference right there. And then the last thought is that you'd be helping out an old fellow that's, he's on his last legs, I guess you'd say, and he's wanting to get rid. That's why he's getting rid of all this stuff, because he doesn't have anyone to leave it to. All right, this is an old song that I heard Skaggs bring back. I don't know where it came from originally, but I haven't done this song, and I'm not exaggerating. I have not done this song live in front of anybody in way more than 20 years. But I just saw it on my list the other day, and I thought, well, I ought to do that again. So I'll give it a try. I didn't. I'm doing it from memory, so if I get it, we get it, and if I screw it up, we screw it up. All the things that we have done together, all the joys and sorrows that we shared, made me feel our love would last forever. But now I know that you never really cared. Don't step over an old love to get to somebody new. Don't step over an old love who always has been true to you. I was trying to get it where you can see my chords. When I turned my back, he caught your fancy, and he turned an innocent affair into something more than just a friendship. While my dreams all wither in despair, don't step over an old love to get to somebody new. Don't step over an old love who always has been true to you. Now you think you're happy with your new love, but you don't know he's been untrue to you. Just wait until you hear the whole town talking. Well, then you'll feel these heartaches like I do. Don't step over an old love to get to somebody new. No, don't step over an old love who always has been true to you, who always has been true to you. Don't step over an old love. Here's an old love right here that the old man can't play anymore. So, it's a nice old guitar. I hope you'll bid on it and make him happy. As I told you, and I'm not lying to you, I just want to be clear, I do make a small commission on it, but the small commission, honestly, I swear to you, wouldn't even begin to pay for my time. So, anyway, thank you, Dan Andrews, for that wonderful contribution. I really do appreciate that. I seriously appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. We've got, 15 minutes max here that we've got still to go. So I'm going to try to answer some questions here. JESCH046. Good morning, Jerry. Planning on changing guitars over to be left-handed guitar and would like to know how to remove the pickguard. Well, the best option for the most part is heat. Take a heat gun, make sure you test your heat. Do not just go straight to the guitar. Make sure that you know how much heat's coming out. Mine is totally variable heat. I can turn it all the way down to almost nothing to very, very hot where it'll melt paint, or burn paint off. So mine's totally variable. And I test it on my skin before I go to the thing. And you would want to heat it up, where it's nice and warm, really pretty warm, almost what you'd call hot, but like that. And then you're going to want to work it up from the edge and then just keep working it up, slowly. And sometimes it works where you grab the end and you pull and you heat as you pull, as you're lifting, and you keep heating, that kind of thing. So that may help you get it off there. Your other issue, if you're making a left-handed guitar, is your saddle. Your saddle slot's going to be slanted the wrong direction. But, it is what it is, and maybe you want to address that and fix it, and maybe you don't. But, anyway, that's a concern, a consideration. And your nut, of course, is going to have the big slots on the wrong side. Then you'll have to put a different nut on it also. But you probably know all that. I'm just pointing it out. But good luck with it, and I hope that helps you. There's quite a few comments, but I'm looking for the ones with the question marks in the front. Mike Saba says, Jerry, have you ever heard of people being allergic to super glue? Yeah, it sure messes up my sound. Boy, it messes me up too, Mike. People say use super glue for your filler and for even for a finish. And I say, how do you stay in the room? I'm not knocking that for that purpose. For that purpose, it's possibly very good, but I can't stay in the room to do it. So I'm like you. Man, that stuff just nails me. The least little bit of it nails me. So yeah, I wouldn't doubt that that you can be allergic to almost anything. So it wouldn't surprise me. How is Ron doing? Bill Allen asks. Ron's doing well. He was here, I think, Monday, and we just monkeyed around and pretty much killed most of the day by doing almost nothing, just looking around here on the farm and walking around talking and stuff. Let's see. Ron's building a new house, by the way, and that's why he's not helping me with the saddles now, because he's in between houses and he doesn't really have a shop right at the moment and all that. He might go back to building the saddles for me later. I don't know. Paulo Rosa. That's a neat name. Paulo, where are you from? I would assume you're from, I'm going to guess, Portugal. I'm just guessing that. You might be from South America, too. I'm just guessing. But I'm going to guess one of those two. Either Brazil or Portugal is where I'm going to guess. David Tharp. Hi, Jerry. What is the best way to remove binding? Have a 67 Gretsch that someone rebound but did a really bad job. I'd like to redo it, but don't know the best way to remove it. Well, David, you got your work cut out for you. It's not an easy job. It's really hard. It really is, and it's really hard to do it well. Yeah. Caleb was actually pretty good at that, at removing it and getting it off in one piece. He did that pretty well most of the time. And I can do that and get it off in one piece if I don't get impatient. My problem is I do get a little impatient with it, and I start pushing a little hard. But for the most part, you kind of got to cut it off there. It depends on the kind of binding you have to, because, you definitely don't want to heat an old those nitrite or those celluloid type bindings. They will burst into flame like that. So for the most part, you got to take an X-Acto knife and cut it off. You might be able to heat it and get it to loosen up a little bit, again with a heat gun, but again, being super careful that you don't burn something else. There's no easy way, David. And the only other thing I can tell you is I have actually routed them off under certain circumstances, where like it was an inexpensive instrument, number one, and number two, it was just fighting me so hard trying to take it off. I just took a router to it and routed it off. And you got to be very careful with that you don't make your situation worse with your router. And then you need to protect your back or your top or whatever. So as you're routing around there, that your router doesn't scratch the top or the back. So there's all kinds of issues with that. But those are the only ideas I've got. You're just in for a lot of work when you start that. Bill Evans, what do you do when your wife gets angry at you and untunes one of your guitar strings and won't tell you which one she untuned? Well, I just go to my tuner, electric tuner. I tune everything with an electric tuner. So, when my wife gets mad at me, it's usually worse than untuning a string. You got to remember, she operates a Bobcat and everything else here on the farm. So if she gets mad at me, I'm in trouble. David Tharp, did you know that years ago it was not legal in Texas to hang a man with a wooden leg? They had to use a rope. Okay, funny. That was one of those dad jokes, I think. Let's see. Somebody asked, why does a chicken coop only have 2 doors? If it had 4 doors, it'd be a sedan. Oh, you guys are having fun in the comments, aren't you? Again, I see the contribution there by Dan Andrews. Thank you very much. Clyde Lewis, does anyone know if Jerry has a video of taking the back off an F-hole arch top? Seem to remember one, but I've been through the videos and can't find it. Well, Clyde, I kind of think I did that too, but honestly, the truth is, I don't remember which one. Yeah, I don't remember. It would be one of my older ones, I'm pretty sure of that. Sorry, if I knew it, I'd tell you. My best guess is just like you would do. I would just Google it, because with 1,000, by the way, I do have well over 1,000 videos out there now. Mostly due to the fact that I'm putting them out the daily vlogs and all that, but there's well over 1,000 videos on YouTube now. Gary Seavolt. Good morning, Jerry. I'm currently putting together a spruce top for a dreadnought. How do you determine the thickness when toning before braces are installed? Well, Gary, the truthful answer is I don't do too much with that. I just stick to around 100,000ths of an inch. I mean, give or take a little bit. That's just about where I go with it. And that's just the truthful answer. I don't come up with any magical ideas or anything on that. There's so many theories and thoughts on so much stuff with instruments, and quite honestly, most of it is smoke. So that's what I do. Let's see. Bill O'Reilly. Is this the famous Bill O'Reilly? If it is, sorry, I've never watched your program. I just heard your name. How to repair finish chips, 1965 Gibson J50. Well, Bill, that's that finish thing again. And if you ask 50 people, you get 50 answers on that. There's so many factors to that. Probably one of your safest ways to do it, because this would probably work almost no matter what kind of finish it is or how much of a problem it is to just get you some shellac and drop fill it with shellac. Shellac's a good finish regardless. It's not a good top coat finish. In other words, if it was a large area, I would probably put something over the top of the shellac. But if you're just drop filling a hole or a chip or something like that, then the shellac's probably one of your most reliable ways to fill it, because, well, shellac's easy for one thing, and it dries fast. So you could just take a toothpick and drop fill it with drops from your toothpick. Now, you can get shellac in amber, which is kind of a yellow. So like if your instrument's old vintage and it's turned yellow, the yellow might be your best bet. Or you can get it in clear. So you can get it at your local box store. But shellac's probably one of the safest ways to do it without creating other issues. A lot of people would tell you to fill it with CA glue. And CA glue is a good option if you know what you're doing and you got some experience. But you can screw up your whole instrument in about 1 New York minute with super glue. So I don't usually recommend that to someone unless I know they know what they're doing. So I would say the safest way would probably be shellac. And you'll probably be happy with that if you just drop fill it with shellac. It also sands easy. That's another thing. So you could, if you have to sand a small area, you could sand that and lightly sand it with like 1200 and then maybe 2000 and then buff it with semi-chrome and you'll be good. Thomas, I can't pronounce the last name, McAlpine? Thomas McAlpine. Why don't you sell day tickets for your fishing pond as a source for extra income, catch and release? Well, we have the main pond out here front. People that stay at the rental retreat, we allow them to fish, and it is catch and release, and they do fish there. So, that's all. And I don't know. What you're saying is a possibility, but we just use it for our own recreation and for the folks that are staying here. David Marino, I purchased an inexpensive guitar that has a very heavy gloss finish. It's not worth refinishing. Can you thin out the finish without removing it completely? Well, David, I guess everything's possible. So, I guess you could, but you're in for a lot of work. And I don't know if it's really worth it or not, but you'd have to be the judge on that. But yeah, you probably could. You could sand it down, and the risk you have is when you're sanding something like that, often you don't realize it, but man, you can go through it pretty fast in certain places. Most likely if it's a thick finish, you're not going to go through it at all, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes it may look like it's thick, and there may be places where it's not so thick. And you could sand through it. And then you got trouble, because then it's hard to match it and hard to make it look good. So I'll leave that up to you, David. But yeah, you probably could do that. And, I will just agree with you that too much finish is not a good thing. I'd rather see one that's barely got any finish than one that's got so much. It's like putting a blanket over your instrument. Let's see. Michael Boyer, speaking of tuner, yours is nice. What is it? Are you talking about this tuner? If you are, this is a Korg orchestral tuner. It's an OT-120. Orchestral tuner stand, that's why it's OT 120. I really like this tuner. It's worked really well. It's just a bench top tuner. See, you can use the clip-on ones, which I do use when I'm playing. I always use the clip-on one. But when I'm working on my bench, it's nice to just have this sitting here, and all I got to do is turn it on. I don't have to connect it to anything. It's just handy. So I really do like the tuner. We're about out of time. Well, we are out of time, but I'm going to try to answer the last question or two here. Bill O'Reilly, Bill said thanks. Bill's my distant cousin. Well, there you go. Well, tell him next time you see him, tell him I don't watch his program. No, don't tell him that. I'm just teasing. But Binding slots, how to start. Binding slots, how to start. Well, you start with a router. Yeah, you know, there's all kinds of router setups for that, and you definitely, it depends on what you're doing. There's so many ways to skin that cat. So once again there, I probably shouldn't try to go into depth on that because the depth would be a half-hour discussion. But yeah, you probably just need to do some research. I've got lots of videos out there that show me doing binding, so you may want to look at what you're, look up what you're looking for. Are we talking about on a guitar, talking about a mandolin, whatever? So it could be very different, and the way I would do it would be very different. Scott Roberts, you can put some vanilla on that bruise on your right arm that you got from removing that bridge plate the other day. Yeah, well, maybe that's a good idea. It's not quite so bad now. I can still feel it, but it's not quite so bad now. It's been a day or two. But yeah, that guitar, it fought back, and that ain't no kidding. That I'm really dreading doing the bridge now, but the only thing about the bridge is I put it on with Titebond about 15, 20 years ago. So I think it'll come off okay because Titebond's usually fairly consistent on how it comes off. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. But getting that neck out of it, oh my gosh. I may have to take the whole fretboard off that one to do it. Oh my gosh. I'm just dreading it. I'm really dreading it. But we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's about it, guys. I'm going to call that a done deal, and I thank you so much for joining in and being so nice to me. I thanks once again for that donation. I appreciate it. All the money sure does help around here because that's one thing I got plenty of is expenses. So thank you very much. We'll see you probably Monday. I will try to put a video out yet tonight that Emery had prepared ahead of time, but it's not part 3. It's a different video. I'll just have to look at it and see what it is because I don't remember offhand. And I'll try to get that released this evening. We'll see you next time.